Hey everybody, this is Mark Levine from the New York City Real Estate Podcast. So I'm in the real estate industry since 1998, and I am actually part of a company called EBMG, and what we do is we manage real estate all over the city. And what I wanted to do is do a weekly podcast that really hits onto the interesting topics that we have that are affecting residents, that are affecting owners. So what I've done is I've asked two representatives from Assured Environments to come and talk about bed bugs, which is a really meaty topic these days, and it's really something that everybody is concerned with. So I have Barry Beck, who is the Vice President of Assured Environments, and I also have Stephen Chiovaro from Assured Environments, and you're an account executive, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so kind of went into what I do. Why don't you give a quick background on each of yourselves, and then we'll go dive down into the topic.
You go first, Steve?
Sure. So Stephen Chiovaro, account executive, Assured Environments. Mark, thanks for bringing us in. Assured Environments has been around since 1934, servicing all 5 boroughs, Long Island, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. Specialize in IPM programs for all kinds of buildings, whether it be from bed bugs, rats, roaches, bird control, compact or chute cleaning.
All right.
I'm Barry Beck, Vice President of Assured Environments. Been with Assured 27 years, been in the industry 38 years. Bed bug expert, have been for probably close to 20 years when we first started seeing bed bugs in New York City. And we are one of the largest pest control companies doing bed bugs in the tri-state area.
Yeah, great. So let me just start off by saying if anybody wants to send any emails to us, you could do so at nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll answer them, and maybe something will come back to you as well for a question and answer for extermination. And bed bugs is so interesting, and it started for me. I think the first experience that I really had a bed bug was 2009 when I took over a building in Brooklyn, and I was just about to take it over, and what they said was, can you step in a few days early? We're having this issue with bed bugs, and it was about an 80-unit building, and I didn't realize the extent of what I was walking into. So there was one apartment on that top floor that they couldn't get access to, which we'll go into later, how we could get access into it. But they delayed. So the problem was we were coming in and we didn't know what we were going to be looking at. We didn't know the extent of the infestation, but because of the time issue, out of 80 units, we had 40 units that ended up with bed bugs. So that was really like a trial by fire for me for bed bugs, and it really was like, okay, this is a topic that if it ever comes, it's like a code red situation. It's almost not that it's as extreme as a fire, but if you let it go for even a day or two beyond where it should, you're going to be paying so much more money, having so much more grief, and affecting so many apartments. So I know that everybody that is in a multifamily building, or even if you're in a home, I mean, but you're a single family home, this is a concern because you could get bed bugs anywhere, you know. So part of what we're dealing with is just going through how do we spot it, what do we do when we have it or we think we have it, and how do we treat it. So I'm going to walk through just, I guess, a bunch of things that I wanted to talk to you about, and being the experts, you know. Do you have an entomologist?
Yes, we have 2 board certified entomologists and 3 associate entomologists.
Okay, so what's their role? When do they step in? When you have something that you don't necessarily know what it is, or are they there to confirm that what we're seeing or what we think we're seeing is what it is?
Well, bed bugs are easy for professionals to identify. The entomologists pretty much help us stay ahead of the curve when it comes to resistance to chemicals and proactive on different protocols to be a step ahead.
Right. Okay. So tell me about bed bugs. Where do they live? How are they transmitted? And how do they move around from apartment to apartment? We're very intrigued by this because obviously we have a lot of apartments in a lot of different buildings. We have transient people coming in and some rentals. And I don't mean transient like Airbnb and, you know, day to day, but there are people that come in and service, and they have employees that come in and clean, you know. So what are we looking for in terms of bed bugs? Where are they living in the apartment?
So as opposed to their name, bed bugs, they don't just go into the bed. Although they want to be close to the sleeping host, the mammal, they could be in the nightstands, they could be in the woodwork, the carpet where it meets the wall, a couch in that bedroom. Anything close to that sleeping host is where they could be. Closets, clothes, etc.
So it's possible that I could sit down on the couch and have bed bugs on my person, leave it on the couch, and that's the only place that it affects in the apartment.
Eventually, they're going to reproduce and move out for various reasons and be closer to their host.
Okay.
They don't want to live on our body like a tick does.
Right.
They want to basically feed and then cool down and hide and reproduce. They want to come out between 2 and 4 a.m., feed, you won't feel it, the bite,
Yeah.
and then crawl away so you don't see it.
So I guess a big common misconception about bed bugs, and I think this is more of a, maybe something that's gone away in the last few years, is that it's a poor issue. It's, you know, people that are not clean. I had a lot of people that were afraid to tell us that they had bed bugs because of the way that it would be perceived, but
That's an old perception.
Yeah.
I think that's changed. I did a $46 million apartment not too recently.
yeah. I mean, if people...
And pristine, I mean clean like a hospital. Has no bearing, although the more cluttered you are and the dirtier the surfaces, it's more difficult to get rid of them.
Yeah.
But it has no bearing on getting bed bugs. They're basically hitchhikers.
Yeah.
You usually pick them up and travel,
Yeah.
and suitcase brings them back into your home, and
You could get them at a 5-star resort, or you could get them at the movie theater. It
Absolutely.
doesn't really matter.
I don't know of a hotel in Manhattan that hasn't had bed bugs.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, hopefully, we're going to get to that. I have a question later that kind of deals with travel, but if I'm not occupying my apartment, how long can they live without me being there?
Depends upon the temperature and humidity, but quite a long time is the answer.
Yeah.
It all depends on temperature and humidity. In a lab, in perfect humidity and temperature, they could live 1.5 years.
Wow. So you could
But
literally...
that's because the insect knows there's nobody there to
Right.
feed on and slows down.
Get kind of shut down.
Yeah.
They hibernate while you're not there.
Absolutely.
So you could literally have a mountain house that's your retreat once a year in the fall, and they see you once a year, and you can potentially bring them back. I mean, assuming, you know, temperature but
If
really...
you maintain a good temperature for them with normal humidity, yes, that's possible. But the real world is, if you're not occupying a house, you drop that temperature down, more stress on the insect,
Right.
and less chance of it living there.
So what are the warning signs that we have to look for? If I'm a resident in an apartment, what are the signs that say I may have something that may be bed bugs and maybe I should have this checked out?
Typically, it's upper torso, 2 or 3 bites in a row. They're looking for a
Right.
capillary
Okay.
to drill into.
Yeah. And are some people not allergic to them, so you won't notice the bites?
Many people aren't.
Yeah.
Some people, if they're more prone to a mosquito bite blowing up, they're probably more prone to a bed bug bite showing signs.
Right.
But you could be bit by a bed bug multiple times, show no signs. I could be bit and blow up.
Right. So it's really individual to individual.
Totally.
Which makes it harder for us, because if you have one occupant in an apartment and they're sitting there and they don't know that they have bed bugs, they could let it go for months. Not that they let it go, but that they didn't know about it, and then it could show up in the apartment next door. Suddenly we have a catastrophe on our hands, so it's really about being vigilant.
Right.
And that's a real life scenario when you have someone who lives alone, doesn't show reaction until they see the insect physically itself. And it's a very small insect. It's not something you just blatantly see. So
Right.
if you're seeing them then on a regular basis, you're probably talking about a problem that got more pronounced.
Are we going to see them walking around? Or are they
in
just...
high infestations, you will.
Yeah.
But it's a nocturnal insect until they're getting great numbers. It's not unusual for 3-4 months to them to be in an apartment, and people don't even know that they have them.
Wow. So I guess this brings me to, as a manager of real estate, you know, we handle, for different buildings, we handle it for either the boards, if it's a co-op or a condo, or we do it for the landlord on their behalf if it's a rental building. So from my perspective, what tenants should do is always call and write as soon as you think that you may have an infestation, because it's going to get that ball rolling as quickly as possible. And in the worst case scenarios where you have a landlord or you have somebody that's not responsive, 311 will say that you should call them, and 311 will bring in somebody to check on it. But that's always the last, you know, case. That's really the last resort that you should be going to. So a typical response to a complaint from our side, and you guys could kind of shed some light on this too, the way that we operate is, if you're in an apartment that has signs of a bed bug, we always send in somebody to inspect. So the question becomes, do we inspect by dog, or do we inspect by visual, or is it a combination of both? Is there a reason that we should be doing one over the other, or maybe we shouldn't be doing one, you know, by itself? What would you recommend if I'm calling you and saying, okay, I think I have a bed bug infestation in one particular apartment or more? Should we have the dog? I mean, I know the dog is upfront a higher cost, but I guess I'm worried about. I've heard false negatives in the past. You know, that it's obviously you're going through. People have pets. What would you recommend in that case?
Well, we do recommend the canine. They're very efficient. Our dogs are fed. They're not starved and only rewarded if they find bed bugs that could possibly push that dog in the wrong direction. Our dogs are fed normally. They're rewarded with play or with a treat when they find bed bugs as a normal course. They're very efficient. We have a policy in place that if a dog indicates that there's a presence of bed bug odor, but the people are not getting bit, then we push for the physical inspection. We want to find that insect.
Yeah.
So it's very efficient in doing multiple units canine inspection. To do a proper physical inspection is very time consuming.
Yeah.
You know.
You have to pull apart everything there. You have to go in between the clothing,
take off
the
the sheets and the comforter. You really got to look at that mattress box spring and frame, and it is time consuming to do a proper inspection.
Okay. So I guess I have two parameters there. So one is I get an individual call from one person that I think has bed bugs. We send in the inspection. So that's the hard play for us is do we do the canine versus the physical because it's one apartment. But then what we do is if there's a positive, we do a circle around the apartments and we kind of matrix it out and just are tracking the apartments until we find that there's no more bed bugs surrounding so we could stop it.
That's a standard of care. That's good.
That's practice for sure.
And that I think would make more sense to do the canine because we're getting more value for the dog for the cost. I'm not saying that it's not valuable, but it is when you have a small, let's say you have a small building that's only 10 units, you know, that's a high cost to absorb per unit if it's a co-op or a condo. I mean, it's less so on the rental side because the owner is paying for it.
Right,
you know,
but the price does come down because the dog is so efficient.
Right.
And if the dog indicates that there's the presence of bed bug odor on the right side of the bed, that physical inspector, assuming that tenant doesn't have bites, can go right to that point and pinpoint and not have to, once we find bed bugs, we got to treat. So you don't have to, you know, tear apart the place.
So now that we've got a positive, so what we say is to the resident, now you have to prep, right? So can you walk me through the normal procedure for how somebody properly preps? And I understand that if they're not properly prepped, a treatment isn't worth anything because if they're not containing the problem the way that you're telling them to before they come in and treat, I think that we're just going to have a relapse because it's going to allow it just to kind of keep spreading.
Cooperation is essential. You want to go step by step?
Yeah, so I mean, some of the prep will include all garments running through a heat cycle, making sure it reaches a temperature, which generally speaking, if you put in a dryer, half hour, it's going to reach that temperature, bagging and sealing of that. Making sure, again, critical areas around the bed, around the frame, your desk drawers, especially if they're wood, that's a very good spot for this kind of an insect. Presents a lot more cracks and crevices. Nightstands as well. So it's important making sure that those steps are vital. Anything leaning against the wall, we want to have full access to all baseboards and throughout the dwelling.
Mattresses are really important to not drag through buildings, right? I've seen mattresses being dragged, unsecured, unwrapped. Now,
an uneducated tenant believes they get rid of the bed, they got rid of the problem.
Right.
Of course, we know that's not the case. They are easily saved by treating and putting them in casements.
Right.
There's no reason to get rid of a $1,000 mattress because you had bed bugs. And the box spring also.
And I'm sure that a few years ago when this came about and it was really an epidemic, probably around 2011, 2012 was when we started seeing like New York City push out a lot of the bed bug literature and really try to educate tenants. I think it was around that time that they started fining people for putting out mattresses on the curb without a proper casing. So,
and the hit on before, if you see a mattress on the side,
never take it.
There's some angles we want to cut to save a few bucks. Probably not one of the ones we
never
want to
touch
do
it. Never take it.
Exactly.
There are some states that actually require you to cut the mattress in half.
Oh, really?
So nobody takes it. I remember a lot of cities in Maryland had that as an ordinance.
So you recommend beyond the mattress, even just if you have an infestation, leave everything in the apartment. Don't trek it through the building. Don't put it in the basement. Don't put
Don't
it out
throw
on the
away
street.
your furniture.
Because somebody is just going to pick up and
Right.
be an unwitting host, you
Right.
know, for this, and it's just going to keep spreading.
But like you hit on before, going through the hallways or the elevator with that infested piece of furniture, a mattress, a box spring, they're gonna fall off.
Yeah.
And they're gonna go right into another apartment. So that should be a very important part of communication with tenants to
Right.
make sure, stop, don't take anything out, call management.
So I have an infestation. I don't, but let's pretend. I'm starting to get itchy. This happens whenever I have open
I
meetings.
have that effect on people.
Whenever I have open meetings about bed bugs specifically, I think half the population in the building by the end of that meeting is itching, and I'm right there with them. It's definitely a psychosomatic thing.
Yes.
So if I have bed bugs and I'm being treated and I'm prepped properly, I could choose, or my landlord can choose, or the managing agent can choose hot versus a cold treatment. Are there different price points for each? And regardless if there is, which do you recommend generally speaking?
Very simply, we do not own the technology. We buy it, and we're going to use what's the most efficient and quickest in getting rid of the problem. And there's no question the universities have proven this with study that heat is the way to go. It penetrates deeper than the cryonite, the freezing. We only use cryonite when mandated by a certain institution, and I think all we have left using cryonite is hospitals, because you could be back in a room in virtually minutes, but it doesn't penetrate well, so we don't prefer to use cryonite. We prefer to use our steam units or heating units, depending upon, there's many different procedures for
Right.
bed bugs.
And what's the typical turnaround time for retreatment? Because it's not always just the first treatment and done.
We
You leave
recommend a
it.
14-day follow-up.
Okay. And you don't test, obviously, because there could still be live bugs that will hit a dog test, right? After the first treatment. So you do
Correct.
first treatment,
We
you
do
wait
second
14
treatment.
days, second treatment, and then how long after that would you recommend that we have a dog or a physical inspection after?
I would recommend a couple of weeks.
Okay. So this is it's a lot of work, because it's not even just a lot of work for that one unit, it's a lot of work for the circle diagram that we were talking about before, and just scheduling everybody and making sure that there's proper follow-up, making sure that there was proper prep. And I think that one of the things that tenants are worried about is the cost. And from our perspective, you know, the landlord technically in New York City is required to ensure that the building is pest-free, and I think one of the pests that they would consider is the bed bugs. So in a co-op situation is similar to a rental situation where you have a proprietary lease in a co-op and you have a lease in a rental. So the tenant would be able to, in most circumstances, go and have the landlord pay for it. Actually, the New York Times did an article, I think it was June 15th of 2019, this year, it was a question, and it was, could I be charged for my bedbug treatment? And the real reality of it is, if you could prove that one unit alone brought in the bed bugs and nobody else had it, after inspection, we could probably charge back. So usually, from our perspective, the landlord will cover it, or the building owner will cover it, the cost, but the tenants are usually responsible for prepping and for the dry cleaning and for
That's
the
the
laundry.
general rule that we
generally
find
speaking.
also.
Yeah, and I guess everybody that listens to this, I hope you have insurance, and you should check with your insurance company to see if they would take care of that. So let me just reiterate that anybody that's listening this deep, you could send me an email at nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com, and if you have any questions on this or anything else, that's nycrealestatepodcast.com. So we're continuing here. We've got Barry and Steven from Assured Environments, and we're talking about bed bugs. Common areas are tricky. I said before that we had mattresses, we have people taking clothes out, going down to the laundry machine, we've got people taking furniture out. How could we be proactive, not only just treating the residential spaces, but also the common areas of the building where there's a lot of foot traffic? Would you recommend preemptive? I had a building that was doing it with diatomaceous earth, which is, I guess, is that a natural product that's out there to stem off the flow of bed bugs, or be more of have more of a resistance to them coming in? Or would you recommend that you guys come in and professionally treat any of those, hallways and laundry rooms and meeting spaces, elevators? Is that something that you do?
Well, diatomaceous earth will kill a bed bug and other insects. Unfortunately, most people that use diatomaceous earth put so much out that no insect in its right mind would go near it.
Right. So you're just
2
pushing the
inches
problem
around it.
somewhere else.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, with proper equipment in a wall void, in a crack and crevice,
Yeah.
and voids in general, this would work. But unfortunately, when a homeowner uses it and doesn't have the right tools in order to get it into the right places, it's over-applied, it's an unhealthy situation. I would not recommend it in your hallways. Sometimes a management company will come to me and say, well, we're redoing our hallways. Do you recommend carpet or a tile? Tile.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if the bed bug was distributed in the hallway, where would it go?
Right.
Between the wall and the edge of the carpet.
Yeah.
The high, they want to be, nocturnally, they want to be seen.
Yeah.
They want to come out at night. A smooth surface, this is one of the few insects that walks on its nails and doesn't get good footing. That's why if you find them in the bathroom, it's usually dead because it ran in place, couldn't get footing, or a kitchen. So the smoother the surface, the better it is for management.
Okay. And as owners, we should be proactive in making sure that any crevices, cracks, openings in the apartments also are sealed, right?
That's a good practice.
Yeah. Any other ways that you could think of that bed bugs or other insects would get through from apartment to apartment? I guess it would be through plumbing pipes. It would be through electrical
Right,
outlets.
so the better, logically, that they're sealed, the less
Yeah.
that they're going to be able to travel.
Right.
Your public areas per se, your basement, your compactor chute, those are not areas where bed bugs are going to hide and proliferate. They're
Right.
not going to do well. They want to be close to a sleeping human.
Okay. That's
And
fair.
people ask questions about dogs and cats. If there were no humans in the apartment and were just dogs and cats, eventually they would find that mammal.
Right.
But they do not prefer dogs and cats for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to the capillary, they have too much hair, they're constantly scratching. Humans, they feed, they leave.
Yeah.
It's good.
I'm not a cat person either, so I don't blame them. So with traveling, we mentioned it before, one of the things that I am religious on whenever I go to a hotel is I kind of strip down the bed, I look under the bed, I pull up the mattress, I actually, if there's a picture above the bed, I will look behind the
Excellent.
picture. I am super scared of bringing bed bugs into my house because I deal with this on a daily basis. So beyond that and like dripping in Lysol, what else can we do?
Well,
You
good.
You put some of your belongings in the bathtub, in the bathroom. Believe it or
Yeah.
not, just as Barry alluded to, it's a poor area. It's not an area where it's going to thrive
Right.
on per se compared to near its host. Aside from that, doing proactive visual inspections to your materials,
Okay.
I always
laundering anything after you leave.
Yeah, like everything should go in
Processed
that
your
laundry
clothing.
bag and not leave. Yeah, because whenever I go into a hotel, I never put my stuff down until after I've checked.
That's
So maybe
exactly
just-
what a professional pest control operator.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
And that's what we do too.
Do you bring booties though on vacation? You don't go that far. No booties.
I peel back the sheets, head of the bed.
Yeah.
I'm looking on the underside of the piping for
Yeah.
peppering as if
Yep.
somebody sprinkled pepper.
Yeah.
If there's nothing there, I lift up the mattress off the box spring looking for peppering, flashlight, check the headboard, nightstands. And then
See,
I
we should have
enjoy
done
my
this in a
step.
hotel room. There's a hotel in the building next door. We could have done that. That's too
Absolutely.
bad.
Next podcast.
Next podcast. So on our end, there's like local laws that we have to abide by with bed bugs, and a new one came out in 2017. I've done a video on it actually. It was called Local Law 69 of 2017, and what that states is, once a year, us as owners and managers, we have to reach out to every tenant yearly to see if they had a bed bug infestation. If they did, was it treated, was it untreated? And we have to kind of capture all of that information and put that out there. So in late 2018, early 2019, that was the first filing. So I have to do that for every single building of ours that's considered a multifamily building, dwelling, that has an MDR. So we're on top of that in terms of filing with HPD. So for anybody out there that lives in a multiple dwelling registration, or you have, or you're a managing agent or you're an owner, just make sure. And the way that you have to do it is through HPD online. But if you have an invalid MDR, you're not allowed to do it. So you'll be in violation of two things if you can't do it, because you'll be in violation of the MDR not being valid, and you'll also be in violation of not filing the bed bug registration. And I'm assuming right now you have to know the emergency number on the multiple dwelling registration for a building in order to get access to the record, but I'm assuming they're cataloging all of this information because it's going to be visible soon. So it really behooves all of us as owners and managers to make sure that we eradicate as quickly as possible, because we don't want to see a 10-unit building that has 6 units that are infested and it's visible. And not only do you have to file it, but you have to post it. You get the choice when you file it. It could be either in a visible place in the building, the number of everything, or it could be just on a new lease. So we have to give that to new people coming into the building. So it is an awareness thing that we're seeing now. So the filing period actually for 2019 is December 1st through 31st. So have we covered everything on bed bugs? Do you feel like we've gotten all the information out there?
There's a tremendous amount, and there's a tremendous amount of questions that people have. They read a little bit on the internet and they think they know a lot, but
Yeah.
a lot of information is very, very old.
Yeah.
We get the latest and the greatest from the universities. They're constantly doing studies. And our problem really isn't eradicating bed bugs. We know how to do it. It's getting the cooperation from the tenants so we can get access. And there are those tenants that really slow that process down.
Actually, you bring up a good point, and I meant to mention it before, but I have had issues with getting access into apartments, and I've had boards and that we deal with on the co-op side where they're like, well, can't you just break down the door? It's an emergency. But the housing court doesn't consider this a true emergency. And even though you're given like specific guidelines within the proprietary lease or your bylaws if you're in a condo, you don't necessarily have the right to make this emergency repair without going through the steps of housing court. So if you can't get access into an apartment, you can't break it down for this. It's not a true emergency, even though we may be able to pin the cost of the eradication that we'd have to go through for the other apartments because it's spreading. We may be able to recapture some of that, but we do have to go through the legal channels if we do have an issue with going into apartments. So
I did want to mention that
Yeah.
your elderly have a tendency to have larger infestations because, number one, their immune systems are suppressed.
Right.
They don't show typical bites. They typically don't see that well. And what happens is the bed bugs flourish.
Yeah.
And they move out before you even found out they had any because
Yeah.
they didn't see any, they didn't feel any, they didn't
Yeah.
have any indication. So those are your tenants that are most vulnerable to bed bug infestations, and frequently those are the ones that infest buildings.
all right.
And
Well,
to add to
yeah.
that, a lot of the time you have aides in those apartments
Right.
continuously visiting them,
Yeah.
and they go from apartment to apartment to apartment, and then you have people call in and say, how did they get it? My mom just sits in the apartment day after day after day. Our first questions, do they have an aide?
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
Not saying that's 100%
Yeah.
where it originates, but a lot of the time it piggybacks on that.
All right. Well, Barry and Steve, I appreciate you coming in. And if you want to reach out to you, it's aepest.com. And the phone number is 1-800-670-7037. I'm Mark Levine again. You can email us any of your questions at nycrealestatepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see about my company, EBMG, you can follow us on all social channels at EBMG LLC, and we hope to maybe see you again on another exciting extermination issue. But thank you for coming in.
Pleasure.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.